Hey everybody, I'm Steve Moore.
And I'm Mark Castleman.
We know the pain and heartbreak of porn and sex addiction.
And we know the triumph of breaking completely free.
Every day, we help our clients find hope and healing.
Join us in the fight to take back your life, your marriage, and be stronger than ever.
This is the PBSC Squared podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the PBSC podcast. This is episode 270. And the title you can see here, my partner finally admitted to having a porn/sex addiction, but he won't do the work of recovery or open up. What can I do?
Well, that's definitely never anything we've heard.
Yeah, we've never heard that, not even from our own partners.
No, we can't even relate to this on a personal level at all.
Oh boy. Well, this was so well said in what this partner submitted to us. We're going to read this submission. It's a little lengthy, but not bad. But it has so many important points in it. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we're going to launch right into talking about this. So she says, my partner and I have been together for 5 years. 2 years in, I started to suspect his porn use and would directly ask him. He would always deny it and or blame his declining interest in having sex with me on being tired and stressed from work. When I would say that I missed being intimate with him regularly like we used to, he would tell me that he doesn't feel intimacy through sex. Now, right there in her submission, she has in parentheses, red flag. There was a big red flag to her, which it should have been. Then she says, last June, I found some of the content he was looking at. And she lists all the different social media places where she found what he was doing. And I confronted him. He finally admitted to watching porn regularly and that he would prioritize watching it over being intimate with me. Long story short, with a few more conversations, he admitted to being a porn addict and begged for me to stay, and swore that he would do the work needed to make it through this. Over the past 8-ish months, he has promised he hasn't looked at porn. And she has in parentheses, whether that's true, I'll never know. He read a book on pornography addiction to learn about the issue. He listened to some of our PBSC podcasts, but mostly only if I send him an episode and that I thought he should listen to it. He started journaling at the start of all this, but eventually stopped. He started seeing a sex addiction therapist, but only went twice and didn't share anything about his sessions when I asked him about how it went. He's very closed off. And besides the porn, our biggest issue is that he cannot or will not open up or have uncomfortable conversations. I was hoping that in this process, he would emotionally mature and put in effort to learn about and grow from whatever led him to the porn in the first place, and become more able to open up and form a deeper emotional connection with me. Despite me begging him to have relationship check-ins with me, he doesn't. Anytime in the past he has betrayed my trust or hurt me, he never checks in on how I'm doing or initiates any of the conversations or actions needed to recover. He says he's just not good at opening up. I'm out of ideas on how to get him to open up and emotionally mature and become more self-reflective. In our last conversation, I brought up that besides not watching porn anymore, he really hasn't done any of the work, and he agreed with me. And once again, he said he's just not good at opening up or all of this. I know that it won't be a drastic change overnight, but I expect to have seen at least one attempt at initiating a check-in or anything over the span of 8 months. Am I an idiot for holding out hope for this long? Is this the behavior of someone who clearly doesn't care enough to change and grow for or with me? Oof. There is a lot in that submission.
Yeah, there is. And we definitely can connect with the frustration this partner's feeling. And I think what she says towards the end is a good encapsulation. You know, I was hoping that during this process of me staying with him and him trying to work on these things that, he was going to, I think her words are not off base, that he was going to mature, that he was going to, evolve and make changes, and he hasn't. And so we definitely wanted to kind of give some thoughts about this. Some of that's going to be affirming. Some of it's probably going to be expanding a bit on what's being said, and hopefully we can lend some
Well,
light on where to go with this.
and I want to say something else I think is really important. Not only can we relate to this partner who's written into us because we experienced our own partners having these things happen and all the betrayed partners we've worked with over nearly 2 decades. Steve and I, when we read this, we could also see us in our full addiction. These descriptions are very much about us. And so we can see things from the standpoint of this addict as well. And I think that's important to understand that we're coming from both of those places.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely a lot to address on both sides of the coin. So there's a lot of ways we could tackle this, but for the purposes of the podcast today, we thought we'd come at this from a kind of a structured standpoint and break this issue down into two sides, because there are two primary issues that we see going on the part of this guy that are going to need to be addressed from his end, but she's going to need to decide on how to authentically respond to that with boundaries and with her own needs, and so let's talk about that. The two parts are a lack of willingness and a lack of skill set, because they are different. And let's start with the lack of willingness. Um, Few people on the planet can connect more with that lack of willingness, or half-assery, for lack of a better term, in the process of change. I mean, I've been actively involved in recovery for a little over 15 years. I half-assed it from 13 to whenever whenever that many years ago was, 27 or whatever it is. And was caught in that trap that many find themselves, right, of making these small little momentary changes, or going to extremes that weren't sustainable or realistic, or using dysfunctional methodology like trying to punish oneself into change. Or, I mean, the list just goes on, and we've talked about those all the time on the program. But where this, I think, starts, obviously, before we even talk about that side of it, is a message to this partner who has held on for so long. And some of this you probably already know, but maybe having it affirmed is going to be helpful. The first rule is that you cannot change him. You can't fix him. And we know that every partner, I think, on a certain level, knows that when they come to our clinic or when they come to Dare to Connect. But I think having that validated, and sometimes it's one of those messages that we have to hear repeatedly, time and again, because it's human nature for us to want to reach out and to even sway or influence the lives of people that we care about in ways that aren't healthy or realistic, because we care. We don't want to see them go down bad roads. We don't want to see them go off the rails. We don't want to see them suffer. We don't want to suffer with them. And so we try to create influence there. And the reality is that we simply, we at the end of the day, being in a relationship with anyone, rule number one of intimacy is honoring another person's agency and capacity for making their own choices and decisions, and our lack of capacity for making them for them. Now, that being said, there are obviously a bunch of things we can do, and Mark's going to launch into a couple here, and we'll kind of
Well,
go
let
from
me
there.
let me say something. I think it's important for partners listening today, as well as addicts or guys who are wondering if they are in addiction, or maybe guys who are in recovery but not all the way in. This is a partner who sends in a submission like this. This is, yes, there's a lot of pain for her. There's betrayal, absolutely, and all of that is horribly hard. But she's not just coming from, you can tell in her submission, she's not just coming from the place where, how does this partner of mine stop being a jackass? Right? Coming down on him, just all, up in arms about him. She doesn't come across like that at all. she's very much in the place that our partners, our wives, Brittany and LaDawn, found themselves and have expressed to both of us over the years. Yes, what you were doing was very painful. Yes, that you wouldn't open up, that you wouldn't take recovery seriously, fill in the blank. But also, it was very painful for us because we could see the potential in you. We knew that at your core, you were a good man. And we married you, committed to be in this relationship because we saw your goodness, your potential, your awesomeness. And when you were behaving in ways that were not that, it was heartbreaking. And we could see who you were down deep, and it was being covered over, and it wasn't coming forth, and it was very hard for us to see. And I think it's important for everybody to know that that is a very big part of this as well. Not just coming down on the addict for his bad behaviors, which is important, but also his potential and the awesome man that's in there. And partners see that.
Yeah. No, there's definitely a lot of truth there. You know, again, we can so well relate to this place, and one of the main reasons why we do this podcast is because we don't want to see everyone else out there have to reinvent the wheel. And as a couple of therapists, but also guys in recovery, it is, it's a huge passion of ours to help guys, to move this process along, and for partners and addicts to not be stuck, right?
Yes.
To get unstuck. And so let's talk about some of that. With regard to this partner, because again, he's not the one listening to this primarily, at least she is. So rule number one is definitely you can't change him. But the next piece on this is you've heard, if you listen to our podcast for any amount of time, it sounds like this person has. We talk constantly about this concept of the authentic self, and what that means. Who I am deep down, both today, but also who I am striving to become. It's an amalgam of my hopes, my dreams, my wants, my fears, my incapacities, my insecurities, my strengths, my assets, my everything, both current and who I'm trying to evolve into. And we operate both in the podcast, but also in our Dare to Connect program and in our clinics. Then intimacy, a baseline requirement for that is the preservation of the authentic self at all costs. Intimacy happens when two authentic selves align and converge.
Yeah.
In its
Yeah.
greatest form, it's when two people are able to emotionally, physically, and otherwise be naked with one another and say, I know and see all of you, you know and see all of me, and we can support, care for, and help along one another.
Yeah. Oh,
And so that
yeah.
has to be protected, at any cost. And so if you're going to be in an intimate relationship, whether it's romantic or otherwise, intimate relationships should never require compromising of one's own authenticity to maintain the relationship.
Well, because what do you see her describe? I'm the one leading out. He only pays attention to stuff if I send it to him. Right. I'm yearning for daily couples check-ins, but he refuses and won't follow through. You can just hear that she has all of these really heartfelt desires, wanting the relationship to be intimate and to be connected, but she's carrying both sides of the load.
Well, and
And
I think it honestly goes even deeper than that, because I agree with what you're saying, Mark. But on top of that, and we're going to get into that in this next, piece, and you heard it mentioned when Mark read through the submission of just the way he's carrying himself, the way he's engaging, or the lack thereof.
mm-hmm,
He's making it very clear that at least right now, given current circumstances, I don't care what he says, according to the narrative, what's going on, he's not in a place of being willing right now.
mm-mm.
He's not willing to stretch and not willing to be uncomfortable and not willing to see these things. And we'll talk about why that's a
Yeah,
problem in
we're
just a
gonna, yeah, we
second.
will.
But yeah, I think that that's a big piece of it too. It's not even just that she's putting herself all in. He's not willing to take this to a place of, I mean, on multiple fronts. He's not really connecting with her pain. He's not really seeing what's going on. And he's victimizing the hell out of himself. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. So empowering both yourself. The last piece that I want to say about this lack of willingness piece, and this is critical because this is, I want to be clear. I know I'm probably sounding like the more heavy-handed party on this podcast thus far, but when a partner shows up with her voice and she lays out in the clearest terms possible, here are how your actions or inactions are impacting me. Here's how it's affecting me. Here's how I see it affecting us. And if we continue down this road, I can't go past X, Y, or Z level with you. And things are going to only get worse. That is not us encouraging her to be domineering. It's not encouraging us to take charge, because again, notice in a statement like that, what she's doing is she's using her voice to to empower herself so that she can allow her authenticity to shine through and not be cloaking it or hiding it or kind of subliminating it to try to make things work or to make him comfortable. But the second piece of this, and I speak as an addict who needed to hear this stuff, he can only be empowered with real choice if he knows the full measure of the consequences of the choices that are before him.
Yes.
That is how accountability works. I cannot, to whatever degree I am unaware of the outcomes of the choices in front of me, be they good or bad, is the degree to which I am disempowered to be able to make said choice. And even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's hard, and God knows, even though we as addicts don't want to hear it, we need to hear it.
Yeah.
Because the only way I can make a choice about what I do next in this relationship is if I really know what are going to be the outcomes of this. I cannot afford, and she cannot afford, both for her sake of authenticity and for his sake of ignorant bliss, or whatever you want to term we addicts get into in that place. He needs, if he's going to make these choices, it is critical that she do everything on her end to make sure he makes those choices eyes wide open.
Hey everybody, PBSC podcast hosts Mark and Steve here with a special message about our revolutionary online recovery program for addict spouses and couples called Dare to Connect. Multiple times every week, we get messages from subscribers in the program. They're people just like you. They're trying to heal from the devastation of sex and porn addiction and betrayal trauma. And here's a few of our most recent submissions. Here's one from an addict in recovery. It says, D2C has principles that everyone should utilize regardless of their circumstances. It doesn't matter your coping mechanisms. It matters that you want to work towards genuine connection with your partner.
That's awesome. Another testimony from an addict continues on. My wife is just starting out in training as a licensed therapist. Dare to Connect has been far more useful to her than her degree.
Wow.
The way Mark and Steve apply what they've learned is always so redemptive. D2C has opened doors for my relationship that I thought would be shut forever. Mark and Steve are an incredible resource of information on the subject of sex addiction and betrayal trauma. We could not do this journey without their help.
Here's one from a partner who's been with us for nearly a year. I want you both to know that it is because of you guys and D2C that I'm able to be in the place that I am today. I will always be grateful to you both for your feedback and prompt replies to my questions. I can't even come close to putting it into words how valuable my time spent with y'all this past year has been to my life. Thank you for everything you taught me about betrayal trauma and boundaries and thinking errors and loving myself and making myself a priority and standing up for myself.
Love that submission. And then as we close out here today, guys, one more account from another addict in recovery. I wish I had a platform like this 14 years ago where I could have learned and done the hard work of recovery before I had done all this damage to myself and to my spouse. And to be candid with all of you, that's exactly why we created Dare to Connect. You know, Mark and I found ourselves in that place. You know, messages like these and the others like them, they're what Dare to Connect really is all about, guys, and why Mark and I do what we do. Whether you're an addict or a partner of an addict, and no matter where you find yourself in the recovery process, Dare to Connect can take you to the next level. Don't wait another day to catapult your recovery forward. Today is your day for change. Visit us at daretoconnectnow.com to pick up your free 2-week trial of Dare to Connect today.
Well, and I want to lovingly speak to the betrayed partners out there listening right now. Steve is talking about you as partners really embracing and staying true to your authentic, genuine, heartfelt selves. And what happens in betrayal, and this is absolutely legitimate, understandable, and a normal part of this process of betrayal and looking to confront and heal from betrayal trauma. What happens to betrayed partners in a desperation, in a yearning to connect with him in some way, to hold on to this relationship, the threads of it in some way? Betrayed partners will abandon their authentic selves to do what? To try to desperately do something. So they will lash out in anger. Maybe anger will get him to pay attention. They will cry. They will go silent and stoic. They will go into nurturing and rescue mode. Right? Betrayed partners, in the desperation to do something because he's not doing hardly anything, they'll go to all these places that are what? Are a betrayal of their own true, authentic, higher selves because they're so desperate to just do something. And I love, Steve, what you just described. We're inviting all betrayed partners to step back from that and say, let me move into I'm not going to give up my empowerment or my voice, but I'm going to start to use my voice in a way that is directly relevant and directly in the deep space of what is happening here. When you do X, Y, or Z, addict partner, this is how it directly impacts me. This is how I'm feeling when I see the lack of fill in the blank on your part. And if this continues, I will choose to not stay in this relationship. You will make it impossible for this to continue. Right? You see how she's speaking her voice and stating her truth, but she's staying on her side of the street by saying, this is what this is doing to me. These are the feelings I am having. And my wife got to this place where she said, my authentic, genuine, happy, peaceful, fulfilled life train is leaving the station, Mark. And I would love for you to be on this train with me. But I want you to know that me coming out of my authentic, genuine self to try to rescue or force you or get on your back or whatever else, I'm not doing that anymore. And I'm moving forward. And I'll only be able or willing to do that for so long until this relationship will be done. Right? It's very important to understand the difference between true empowerment and understandably going to these other tactics out of desperation.
Well, and that's why sharing that piece is so important, again, on both sides. Relationship, I mean, and the deeper level to this is we've seen this play out time and again with partners that we work with. When a partner begins to compromise themselves, and our partners did this to some degree, both of them, but when they begin to compromise pieces of themselves in order to accommodate the relationship, the visual that comes to mind is they're sitting there watching him tear bricks out of the foundation of the marriage, and in a desperate ploy for them to keep the relationship together, these partners start tearing bricks out of their own house's foundation.
And
it's not okay. It's
holes,
unacceptable. Yeah. And the only thing that's more damaging in this process than betrayal by a partner is self-betrayal. And it's something that we all need to be aware of and be looking at.
Yeah.
Well, pressing on, because I know this is super fun today.
It is. Right?
Pressing on to this next piece here. Let me go back to my screen. Let's talk about this lack of skill set. And so we're going to shift the focus over to the addict side of this, or whatever he's defining this compulsion as for him. It's very common for the guys that we work with to be lacking interpersonal communication skills. And for all the reasons we talk about on this podcast all the time. We learned a long time ago, I think, in two primary modalities, and sometimes it's a combination of both, and sometimes there's even other efforts at play. But either one, we learned to avoid conflict because our addiction or addictive behaviors allowed us to escape them. And so we didn't have to stretch or to grow in the ways that others did in terms of, quote, living life on life's terms. Or we learned through traumatic experience, traumatic repetition or through a lack of nurturing of good skill sets and a negative instillment of, or a proactive instillment, I should say, of negative skill sets, we learned over time to shun connection, vulnerability, and openness. And the reason why I say that, because I know this is about the point where some addicts can be like, what are you talking about? There is an abundance of growing research out there that is all pinning towards one piece, and that is the human brain comes to planet Earth wired for connection, barring rare exception. We are geared for vulnerability, towards a herd mentality, towards connecting with people, sharing the load. It's how the species has grown and evolved since the beginning of time. Isolation, shutting down, turning off, deception are learned traits.
They are.
They are not inherently wired. We pick them up somewhere along the way, be it through trauma or, like I said, through an absence of modeling of good skill sets or a presence of modeling of bad. We learn these traits. We do not come into the world that way. We come into the world open and vulnerable and wanting connection. And somewhere along the line, we pick up these other traits. Now, why is that important for this discussion? Because this guy's, she mentions a couple of times in the submission that this partner, he says, I'm just not good at connection. Or I'm just not good at opening up.
Yep.
Okay. And you're not good at opening up. That is like me looking at Mark and we're standing next to each other and I've got this water bottle and I just drop it and it falls to the ground and I say, geez, gravity sure is a crapshoot. And he looks at me and says, yeah, it is. And then we both use that as an excuse for not standing anymore.
Right. Or
yes,
or
you're right.
Or
like
take it even further. You drop the water bottle and we both stand there and look and say, I'm just not good at picking water bottles up.
Yeah. Or I guess I just can't deal with this gravity thing. It's just,
Yeah.
it is, here's gravity. So I guess we can't move now anymore. We just both better lay in our beds next to each other and just look into the world and wish that we could. Guys, we're not trying to be facetious, but that kind of excuse from one addict to another, and as a guy who used to say those kinds of things, it's bullshit. It's just nonsense.
And I want to just speak to, as I read her submission, something just shouted out at me. Every single behavior, attitude, lack of action, excuse making, whatever else that's going on with this guy, it is all within the addict mindset.
Yes.
There is every chance of that. I'll bet it's absolutely, it's probably close to certain that this guy at his core is a good guy.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm certain of it.
Yeah, lots of potential. He probably does a lot of things well in his life. He probably holds down a job. He probably interacts with probably some people in his life in some healthy ways, effective ways. But this is an addict mindset that has overtaken him over years or probably decades.
Well, you said it perfectly right there. And let's be crystal clear about this. Steve is not attacking the man.
No.
He's attacking the mindset because we've been there.
Yes.
And you know what? When you learn thinking like that, sometimes that bullshittery, we learn it or we repeat it or we hear it or we experience it for so long, we actually come to believe it.
Right.
It sounds insane when you use my gravity example, but that is what we buy into, right?
Well,
we buy into this notion that, I'm not good at it, which is a true statement. And somewhere along the line, we use that as permission mentally to say, therefore, I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. And what is a huge, major transition that we had to decide if we were willing to make. And every guy we've ever worked with that's been successful in recovery, what is the transition point? To stop saying, I cannot do blank, or I am not good at, or instead they stop and pause and say, the addict in me does not want to do blank. The addict in me is not good at blank. But I, in my authentic, higher, better, evolving self, I want to do X, Y, or Z. And whenever I come up against the addict in me, I'm going to step back and distinguish between that and who I really am. And I don't see this guy there yet. He and the addict are one and the same at this point. And he needs to begin to see if he's willing to start to distinguish and step back and choose to take a different path than that old addict mindset.
Yeah. Yeah. So we hope that you're hearing that for what it is. It's I guess you could call this a tough love podcast for lack of a better term, but we need to point that out, right? The reality is, guys, we cannot afford to be blinded by these excuses that are keeping us boxed in. Because and I want to be clear, it may sound like we're championing the partner, and in some ways we are. So let me get to the other side. Do you really want to live this way? Seriously, ask yourself.
Speaking to the addict?
Yeah, are you okay with this? As you'll hear me sometimes get on my soapbox, and we definitely do a lot of this in Dare to Connect. I am a big believer that once in a while it is a healthy thing to get healthily selfish and mentally say screw all the rest of it. I'm talking all of it. God, family, friends, partner. Now that sounds really weird coming from what we say here. I'm not saying to do that truly in every sense. I'm saying it as a check-in mechanism for yourself, because we addicts suck at self-advocacy in healthy ways.
True.
That's part of why we're addicts. The brain is consistently trying to meet needs that we refuse to meet in healthy ways.
Right.
And so you have, and for me and for many of the guys that I and Mark work with, you have to get healthily selfish. Take a second, again, not really throw those things away. I want to be clear about that, but pause for a minute. God knows our brains are good at being selfish in all the wrong ways. Let's try doing it in the right way for a second and say, forget everyone else. Am I happy? Sure, my partner's upset about this. Yeah, that's true, and blah, 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 and whatever. But me, where has this behavior taken me? If I look at my last 10 years of isolation, not opening up, what does it cost me in this relationship, but far beyond? Maybe it's past romantic relationships, job offers, promotions, new opportunities, that business that I was going to open but didn't because I was scared, or those things that I should have said to those people but didn't, and now I'm holding on to all these resentments like Steve used to. Are you happy?
Well, and
Is that
Steve,
working?
You said something really important. I have, as an addict, all these legitimate, genuine needs that are under the surface, but I'm not meeting them in healthy ways.
No.
For example, I'll just bet you that one deep, heartfelt need that this guy has is to intimately connect with his partner, to be open, to be transparent, to let her see all of him. But somewhere along the way, he developed a deep fear that it isn't safe to do so. You have to hide to be safe. You can't put yourself out there. And so what does he end up trying to try? Because he wants that so badly, the intimate, real, genuine connection, and doesn't know how to achieve it, or is too scared to do so, or doesn't have the skills, what does he do? He substitutes that genuine need with the statement, I'm just not good at this. What is that? It's a protection strategy. To protect him from what? The thing he yearns for most. Right? I hope you're hearing this.
Right now, guys,
like a total conflict and contradiction. And it is, between the true self and the addict self.
Right now, guys, in the Dare to Connect program, we are just barely starting as of March 4th. A lot of you listen to these after the fact, but if you listen to these episodes weekly, it's March 4th, 2025. This podcast will be released later today. Right now, we are just barely starting into one of our more popular topics in the program. It comes up in a rotation that is always changing, usually about every year or so. And it's jumping into a series about authentic communication. Now we're starting the drama triangle, and then we're going to be jumping into other things surrounding boundaries, boundary setting, what they look like, all that stuff. That's what's coming up in the program. Really good stuff for the next several months. And when you look at the drama triangle, which we have other podcasts about, we addicts are expert victimizers. We embody the victim role so well. We also take part in the other roles just to keep it interesting. Don't get me wrong, but we definitely tend to live in that place. And going back to to what I was saying before. Again, guys, this is so much more about just you saving your marriage. And Mark and I are not telling you to do this, just quit making Jesus cry, or to, make things, because it's a moral judgment call. Gentlemen, you're drowning. You're drowning and you don't even know it. Just like Mark and I were drowning. You're walking through life in a black and white mentality. It is time to plug in. It's time to plug in to real life, to turn on the Technicolor, to see your situation for what it is, however painful that is, because when we start to plug in with reality is when we start to begin to live life. If that is something that you are interested in, may we not so humbly suggest that you get your ever-loving ass to the Dare to Connect program so that we can talk more about it with you. We've been there. We know where you're at. We understand. We are not talking down to you. We are talking with you.
Yeah.
We spent decades where some of you listening are right now.
Yeah.
Don't try to reinvent the wheel.
And
you did it.
You should all experience the guys, for example, right now in Dare to Connect, some of them who are newer, and some have been here for a while. For the first time in their lives, they're saying, I finally know why I was always doing all these dysfunctional addiction, crazy behaviors. Those were just surface things. I finally now know what I needed and wanted deep down. And you guys are helping me to identify those deep down wants and needs and how to get them met healthily and in a way that is improving and connecting and making my life awesome. I always thought it was about all this surface stuff, and I was just stuck in and wallowing around in addiction. I finally am getting deeper in my life. That's what's happening in D2C right now.
You men were meant for more.
Yeah.
You're meant for better. Please do not buy into the lie that where you are now is all that you are destined for. Mm-mm. We did that for so long, and we can't roll back time for us, but we will be damned if we don't try to help every other guy out there that we can, so that they don't have to go through that same languishing journey, progressively losing what they care about most piece by piece along the way.
Yeah.
Let's do it differently. You can find out more information as well as a two-week free trial about that at daretoconnectnow.com. For all other questions that you would like to submit to the podcast that we can answer in very limited, non-interactive, once-a-week fashion, which is the much more primitive modality, although we know many of you find it helpful. If you go to that same website, there is a link up at the top. It's a big banner. You can't miss it. It has our PBSC Squared podcast logo. You can click on that button. It will take you to the podcast website, and there's a contact form at the bottom you can send those questions into.
Yeah.
We love you all. We care about you. We hope that this topic's has resonated, and if it has, we hope to see you soon in D2C. Take care. Be well. Have a great rest of the week, and we will talk to you next week.
See ya.
Everything expressed on the PBSC podcast are the opinions of the hosts and the participants and is for informational and educational purposes only. This podcast should not be considered mental health therapy or as a substitute thereof. It is strongly recommended that you seek out the clinical guidance of an individual qualified mental health professional. If you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, self-harm, or a desire to harm others, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room.